Hey, welcome back to Final Trade. I wanted to talk today about what I think the future of card grading is. And so, in card collecting, sometimes you have a really nice card or a card that's very sentimental to you or a very valuable card, and you wanted to have it graded. And you do this typically for two reasons. It establishes the authenticity because supposedly the grading house is an expert on this and can say, yes, we, in our expert opinion, know that this card is authentic. And second, it is supposed to remove a lot of the subjectivity out of evaluating the condition of the card. And while I talk about this, I'm just going to show you a bunch of cards. These are not graded, these are just in top loaders. But these are cards I've put aside that are in good condition, and one day I plan to have them graded. Not right now, though. So, again, it establishes authenticity. It kind of sets the bar by a disinterested third party that says basically, look, we just got paid to grade the card. We don't know what you're going to do with it afterwards. We don't have a financial interest in its future. And so here's our expert opinion on what the condition is. And so, often they'll focus on four things: the surface, the corners, the edges, and the centering of the printing on the stock. And so you send your card in and you pay anywhere from 10 to hundreds of dollars per card, depending on the value of the card, and you'll eventually get them back, and they're in these nice thick plastic slabs. They're much more substantial than these. I mean, these are just cheap top loaders. So they're in thick slabs. They have this nice little printed ticket in the top that gives you all the information if you paid for those subgrades of the centering, the edges, the corners, and the surface, or it just has the overall score if you didn't pay for subgrades. And, the issues that you're facing right now in early 2021 is the biggest grading house, PSA, they aren't taking submissions right now. And so they put out a press statement several weeks ago and said, basically, we got as many cards in 3 days as we normally get in 3 months. Isn't that gorgeous? An unlimited lightning bolt. Look at the condition of that. Gorgeous. And so PSA said, look, just, from an insurance standpoint, we can't afford to hold all these cards that people are sending us. And there's just such a huge influx of cards in this, recent times. And so they closed submissions, and the number 2 grading house, BGS, they're probably going to close submissions soon because people who would have gone to PSA are now going to overflow into BGS. And, in the world of graded sports cards and collectible cards, PSA and BGS are, they're pretty close in terms of popularity and the value that they'll give to a card by their reputation. So, they're pretty well substitutes for each other. I know some people will, argue with me on that, but close enough. But there's this other company out there, this kind of up-and-comer company, and it's called Hybrid Grading Approach, which is kind of an odd name, except all the rest are like PSA and BGS. There's like 4 others that are 3-letter acronyms as their company names, and so they're HGA now. And so what Hybrid Grading Approach is wanting to do is basically take an AI that does image recognition, which is a basic bread and butter thing that researchers have been doing with AI for a long time now, that it's really good at. And let's see, this is a 4th edition lightning bolt. And train the AI to grade cards. And so, man, I think people are not realizing yet what a game changer that is for the world of grading cards. Because right now, with how backed up PSA and BGS are, even before PSA stopped accepting submissions a few weeks ago, they had massively upped their prices. And so, their cheapest options were now something like $20, $25. Yeah, that near mint is not on the card. It's on the sleeve the card's in. Don't worry. And so their cheapest, if you just sent them hundreds of bulk cards, the cheapest you were going to get them done for was 20 or $25 each, and most of the grading houses had upped their prices like that more recently. Now, what HGA is doing, if you can imagine what the process would be, they would unsleeve the card, they would put it on a stand that would have a camera and lighting set up for it, and then they would just take very high res pictures of it. They would flip it over, take pictures of the back, maybe some shots of the side somehow, and then they just send it into the AI, and the AI grades it, and that's it. It should take seconds. And so it can essentially come out of the sleeve onto the stand, be photographed. The computer will determine its score, and then it will print out the label and they can slab it. And you can imagine the throughput that a human being can accomplish when all they're doing is removing cards from sleeves and then putting them on the stand and putting them in slabs after they're graded. Look at the no, those are both fifth edition, even though one looks a bit more washed than the other. Just from the color difference, I thought one was a fourth edition. So you can imagine the work throughput difference that AI card grading will allow you to have. So, what are the downstream effects of that? Well, one, the cost to get a card graded should go way down because, if HGA can suddenly process 5 or 10 times as many cards per day per employee as PSA or BGS, then they're going to, and they'll lower their price to pull in enough cards to be able to do that. So you should expect that the cost to get cards graded will come down tremendously. And, the second thing you should expect is PSA and BGS, they're going to have to play catch up with this technology. They're going to have to build or hire or buy their own capability to do the same thing. Yep, Kurt Ape's like a 5-cent card, but I love it. And this one is in beautiful condition. I know, it's like a 5-cent card. It doesn't make any economic sense to grade this card today. One day it will, probably. And so, you'll basically create more capability to grade cards in the market, and that'll cause the price to fall. But what's maybe a second better thing that can happen? Today there's a ton of subjectivity when it comes to card grading. So you literally have a human, they remove it from the sleeves, they examine it under very bright lights with magnification, and they look for damage, and then they basically rate how much damage is on the surface, the edges, the corners, and then the one measurement that's really objective is the centering of the card. There's a little centering gauge you can actually stick the card on, and it'll tell you how far off center the printing is on the paper. So 3 of those 4 things that they rate cards on are very subjective. And in fact, the human could just fail to see the condition of the card. They could fail to see a scratch, or, maybe there's a piece of dust and it's just, it's a really sticky piece of dust and it won't blow off with a tiny little spritz of compressed air. And so, the manifestation of that problem is when you go and you look at the population reports that these companies have. Of course, the population reports are records of how many of each card in each grade they have graded in their history, so that you can kind of get an idea of how rare something is. When you go and look at the population reports, especially for something like alpha magic cards, what you'll see is that for, say, PSA 10s, there will be, 5, 8, 10, 12 of them in existence that PSA has graded as a 10. But then when you look at 8s and 9s, there will be 60, 80, and the reason that happens is not because 10 is so much harder to get than 9. It's that when people send the card in and they think, this is a really good card. I mean, this is a gorgeous card. The condition is just immaculate. And so when they send that in and it comes back as a 9, they say, no, the value of the card is sometimes 3, 4, 6, 8 times higher if it grades a 10 than if it grades a 9. And so what they'll do is they'll take a pair of pliers, they'll bust it out of the case, and they'll resubmit it. Because there's obviously nothing unique on this card that prevents me from resubmitting it, or no way for PSA or BGS to know that I've resubmitted this card. And so they grade it again, and again, 3 of the 4 criteria they grade on are entirely subjective. They have guidelines, of course, and they try to do a consistent job, but ultimately they are making judgment calls on 3 of those 4 criteria. And so there's a chance that when you get it back the second time, maybe it's a 10. And if it is, then yeah, you keep that. You'd never bust out a 10 to get it regraded again. And so that's why there's so many fewer 10s on the population reports than there are 8s and 9s. It's from people resubmitting cards trying to get a higher grade because they're gaming the subjectivity of the system. So that's something that HGA's AI-driven card grading will stop dead in its tracks. You should be able to get the exact same score every time you grade the same card. Now, obviously, you could introduce some problems if you change your camera and lighting setup when you take the photo of the card, and that's something, you know, when they make a change to that setup, they're going to need to do a lot of regression testing to make sure that the AI then delivers the same scores on the same exact cards. But you know, that's not something that's hard for engineers to understand. I mean, they understand how to do that kind of testing and get consistent results. So those are two of the issues that AI grading will solve. Now, one of the problems that HGA will face is there's this kind of network effect issue around grading services and their population reports. So obviously HGA is a new company, so its population report is 0. In fact, I went and looked at it today on their website, you know, and it's just like sadly small, but you know, they've only been accepting submissions for a couple months. And what you really need is a large population report to give your company credibility so that people send you their cards to grade so that you can build a large population report. It's a catch-22, but I really think the kind of economies of scale and the kind of prices they're going to be able to charge for their service, as in the kind of low prices they're going to be able to charge because of the volume they'll be able to do, will really build up their population report. Now, you know, it would take a decade or more than that to match what PSA and BGS have, but I feel like the population report issue is kind of small in the long run. They'll get over it, and especially when you have more and more people sending them cards just because of the price. And I think that will really help to build their population report in time. So that's kind of the biggest problem that they face. But really, I watch a lot of videos, and you know, I watched several videos online about HGA, people's opinions on it. You know, people who have popular trading card and card game and sports card memorabilia channels, and you know, they all just kind of say, yeah, well, they're just kind of another new company. I think people aren't grasping the magnitude of what HGA is doing, of what they're bringing to the table that other companies have not brought yet. And I guarantee you, PSA and BGS are looking at this and they're saying, wait, we can cut out all of this human labor costs and cut out the subjectivity and maybe clear this backlog, maybe lower prices a little so that we induce more people to send us cards so that we have higher revenue overall. It completely changes the economics from the standpoint of the grading houses. So I really feel like people are kind of missing the story so far on the overall effect that AI card grading is going to have. This is my weird misprint one. I don't know. Is it smart to get a misprint slapped and graded to show that it's authentic? I'm not sure about that. If you're here at the end of this video, just go ahead and let me know. Thanks a lot, guys. Give me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thanks.